Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. I'm Michael Puente, reporter with WBEZ Chicago. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us on the show tonight. If race and ethnicity boxes on government forms confuse you, well, you're not alone. We explain some proposed changes the Biden administration is looking to make. Little Village discount vendors get another extension on their leases as the long-term plan for the mall remains unknown. And a new State Department program offers everyday citizens an opportunity to help welcome refugees to the U.S. And a Chicago museum is learning a second language to better serve art lovers.
So that Chicago can be well, and Illinois can be well, and the world can be well.
And 2 local Latinas are flexing their muscles in the wellness business. All that coming up, but our first story tonight, the differences between race and ethnicity and why that matters on government forms. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
For many Latinos, filling out forms can present a category conundrum. On some forms, Hispanic Latino is considered a racial designation, and others, it's ethnicity. Now, for the first time since 1997, the U.S. Census and other federal documents could have new options for identifying your race and ethnicity. Joining us to explain what these new options could be and why it matters are Julie Dowling, author and associate professor of sociology, Latin American and Latino studies at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and Mark Lopez, director of race and ethnicity research at the Pew Research Center. Thank you to both of you for being here on Latino Voices.
Thank you for having me.
Julie, let's get started with you. Oh, well, Mark, let's get started with you. Can you explain the difference between race and ethnicity?
Yes. So in the United States, we tend to think about race as the following categories: people who are of white, Black or African American, Asian or Asian American, Indigenous, Native American or Alaskan Native, or Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander background. That's how the Census Bureau has traditionally, at least in recent decades, identified racial identity in the United States. Ethnicity, on the other hand, is something like Hispanic origin. So places where people are from in Latin America, like Mexico or Cuba, those are usually classified as an ethnicity. Other ethnicities could be things such as, say, your Irish background or your German background. So this is something that's a distinction that we've been making in government forms and in Census Bureau forms, and it's something that is at the heart of perhaps why some people might want to be identified in different ways or have different options for choosing their identity, whether it's racial or ethnic, together or separate. There's a lot of discussion about what's best to do.
Julie, why is it important to know the distinction?
Well, I think that's where, what Mark presented here, was a very nice classic sociological definition of race, ethnicity. But what we've come to see more recently is that there's a lot of conflation between these categories and the way people live their identities. So for me, for example, growing up in Texas, I'm of mixed Mexican and Irish background. So I grew up thinking of myself as biracial, not necessarily as bi-ethnic, right? Because that's an important racialized identity. There was Jim Crow style segregation against Mexican Americans in Texas, including separate bathrooms, separate cemeteries, separate schools, and a whole legal system to sort of undo that. And so when you have a group that's faced a tremendous level of discrimination, we tend to think about that as racialization in sociology. So racialization is the process of discriminating against groups because of these characteristics. And so race is more tied to being categorized by other and that power differential. So there are some groups that fall in and out of these, right? So Mexican can be an ethnic origin, but in many ways it's also a racialized category.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, why do governments at the federal and state level measure race and ethnicity, and how do they use this information?
It's an important part of one key thing, which is what the census is generally for, which is for reapportionment of Congress. And so we want to look at voting rights. We want to make sure that the congressional districts that are drawn every decade represent and reflect the diversity of the country. We've been concerned about voting rights and voter equality for a number of different racial and ethnic groups. But the census and other government data collections are important for other reasons as well. They play a role in allocating money from the federal government. They also play a role in helping planners at the local or state level decide how to allocate resources like fire resources, fire protection resources, policing resources, and to do other urban planning activity. So this information is important because it's meant to capture whether or not different groups of Americans along the lines of race and ethnicity are receiving the benefits equally across a number of different levels of government. And that's really been one of the key reasons why we continue to measure these particular characteristics.
Well, Julia, the Biden administration is suggesting making changes to U.S. forms for Hispanic Latinos. We will be able to select this as a race. Can you explain what this means?
Well, this is a really important move that's happening right now. We spent over a decade, myself included, doing research on this topic to try to get to a better way to ask this. Currently, there has been a separate ethnicity question that asks, are you Hispanic Latino, with options for Mexican, Puerto Rican, and Cuban, followed by a race question that has white, black, various Asian origin groups, Native American, and other. Many Latinos do not feel they fit into those presented categories. And this leads to a lot of problems for filling out the form. And anything that's a barrier to allowing you to fill out that form means you might be less likely to fill it out and lead to an undercount. So we really want to make the form more easy and accessible for people to fill out. And that's part of the process here. About half of Latinos were checking white for their race, and the other half, many of them were checking other race. And the move to do this will be to allow more people to identify how they actually consider themselves in their daily life. It also is really important because we face such racialization and discrimination, including things like racial profiling. It's important to be able to talk about these as racial justice issues. And people also feel as though having that as an option to list your race as Latino will allow us to be able to better speak about social justice issues in our communities.
Well, what do you think the impact will be with these new categories on the diversity of the country in the U.S.?
I think that it will better reflect our actual numbers, because right now it's really hard to fill this out for people who are Latino and also for people who are Middle Eastern, who also don't fit into that category of whiteness that's on there. And so basically, this will allow us to have a much more accurate reflection of our actual numbers.
Now, Mark, evidence found by the Pew Research Center suggests that asking Latinos in two separate questions, their race and ethnicity, can be confusing. Can you explain that?
Yes, if you think about how it works, so think about how you might actually answer these questions. So in the first question, you're asked, are you of Hispanic or Latino background, such as Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban? And then there's a chance to write in other groups like Salvadoran, et cetera. And so somebody answers, yes, I'm Hispanic, and they mark that they're Mexican. Then you get the race question. The race question asks you, are you white, black or African American, Asian American, et cetera, or some other race? And Latinos who may not see themselves in any of those racial categories might mark that their race is some other race and then write in perhaps Mexican. So they're telling us that they're Mexican twice, in the first question and in the second question. And you talk to some folks who go through this and they'll say, I wasn't quite sure what to answer on that second question, so I put down what I had before. That's where you might encounter some of this confusion. But I want to be clear that when we talk about identity and the ways in which the public sees itself, the public is pretty sure, or oftentimes aware of, or has some idea of what their background is and how they want to identify. The challenge has been is that sometimes the questions that we have, whether it's the Census Bureau's questions, other federal surveys, or even public opinion surveys that organizations like Pew Research do, all of these can sometimes have perhaps the less than complete set of responses that people might want to see. And so they don't see themselves in the questions that we're asking about their identity, and they may feel perhaps that they don't know quite how to answer such a question. So I think there's a lot here to think about, but I would say that the public generally knows what they want to, how they want to report or identify themselves. It's just that sometimes the forms that we use may not best capture that.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Our thanks to Julie Dowling and Mark Lopez.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Novak Construction's plan for the discount mall in Little Village remains uncertain. This after 21st Ward Alderman Byron Siccho Lopez hosted a meeting earlier this week with vendors to reassure them he is fighting to keep it open. We caught up with one vendor to hear his thoughts. Take a listen.
Como hemos dicho aquí ya varias veces, queremos ser parte del progreso de la comunidad, de la ciudad. Nosotros no podemos ser desintegrados como una cultura. Queremos realmente mantenernos unidos como un estado, pero queremos mejores condiciones y quedarnos aquí en el Little Village.
It's been nearly 3 years since Novak Construction bought Discount Mall and is yet to roll out a plan for its future. Ever since, vendors have feared displacement as their contracts began to expire. WTTW News was told Alderman Siccho Lopez is set to meet with city departments and Novak Construction next week to discuss next steps. In the meantime, a spokesperson for Novak Construction says the vendors' leases have been extended to the end of March. Refugees to America often find themselves starting from scratch, but a new program is offering everyday Americans a way to give refugees a softer landing. Modeled after a Canadian program, the Welcome Corps is the U.S. State Department's new private sponsorship program for American citizens to assist refugees. In the program's first phase, sponsors will be matched with refugees who have already been approved to enter the country. To qualify, sponsors must join a group of 5 or more private sponsors to commit together, raise about $2,300 per refugee, complete a background check, attend training sessions, and sign a commitment form. Submit a welcome plan documenting how they will support the refugees in their resettlement. And if they're accepted, they'll be required to complete reports and surveys throughout the first year. Joining us now with more are Alisa Roadcup, Executive Director of the Chicago Refugee Coalition, Elena Olea, Associate Director of Programs at Alianza Americas, and Cecilia Munoz, Co-Chair of Welcome.us. Welcome to all of you to Latino Voices. Well, Cecilia Munoz, let's start off with you. There are already some existing resettlement programs through community organizations and faith-based institutions. What is the thinking behind the design of Welcome Corps, in particular, the size of the sponsorship groups and the funding?
So there are 9 organizations that for decades have been resettling refugees in the United States, and they are heroic. They do amazing work, but their capacity is limited. So the idea is to honor the great work that they do in resettling refugees, but expand the opportunity to help people as they start their new lives in the U.S. to anybody in the country, in addition to what the resettlement agencies do. So any group of 5 people that is willing to take the plunge can go through the training, can raise the resources, and can participate in the amazing work of helping someone start a new life in this country.
Well, Elena Olea, your organization, Alianza Americas, signaled its support for Welcome Corps. In what ways do you think the program can help refugees that they might not already be getting, particularly those leaving Latin American countries?
Well, I think it's an opportunity to learn more about living in the United States from other persons. It will be a great opportunity also for immigrants to be part of the effort to welcome recently arrived refugees. So I think the community, that is what this opportunity means for many Latin American immigrants who could be part of this project.
And Cecilia Munoz, do you anticipate getting a lot of interest from Americans in becoming sponsors?
Yes. Our goal, the initial goal for the Welcome Corps, is to recruit 10,000 Americans to help resettle refugees. And we've already had 22,000 inquiries since the announcement. And we know, because there is a similar program through which regular Americans can help sponsor people from Ukraine during this war, that 200,000 Americans have stepped up to help sponsor Ukrainian families in this moment of need. So the great thing here is that the American people are willing to become welcomers, and that says a lot of good things about us.
Now, Lisa Roadcup, your organization also signaled its support. Do you see any potential risks for either refugees or sponsors in this type of design?
That's a great question. I don't see any significant risks to either group. I really only see the benefits. And this program is historic in terms of opening up pathways for everyday Americans like you and I to have a role in welcoming refugees. And at the end of the day, both people benefit so deeply and so richly and immensely from the opportunity to give and to learn and to receive. Once the first 90 days of supports sort of come to a close for refugees, then there's this tremendous gap in how refugees are going to successfully integrate long term. And I think this kind of opportunity where normal everyday people like you and I are invested in the background and the story and the humanity of who these people are, and we know them because we've sponsored them and we've brought them here, and they have meaning and humanity to us. The benefit of this program from that perspective, I think, is extraordinarily powerful and really exciting.
Now, Elena Olea, is this program sufficient for resettling refugees, and is the Biden administration doing enough?
Well, this program complements, as Cecilia said, other efforts that are in place. And I also think this program is uniquely positioned to help counter narratives against immigrants and refugees from the experiences of those involved in the program. I think the Biden administration is trying to amplify possibilities and solutions. This is a great opportunity to get more communities involved in the process. Certainly, a lot needs to be done because the factors that are pushing people to leave their homes and to seek protection in the U.S. are increasing, and we are seeing the numbers increase.
Elisa Rokup, what are you looking for that would indicate this program has been successful?
I think that's an excellent question. I think when we realize in America that embraces radical hospitality as a cultural norm, that we will have made some significant progress that we can be very grateful for and celebrate.
Well, Lisa, staying with you, what do you, when some people are talking about immigration and refugees, they say there needs to be a stop or a limit. What do you think about that? What do you, when people say there should be a limit to the amount of refugees that come into the country?
I think when one understands the definition of who a refugee is, someone who's gone through extraordinary vetting, someone who has fled their country based on persecution of race, religion, nationality, war, that there's a real compelling sort of sense of ethics and moral responsibility to step in to provide asylum and support for refugees. And I think reminding people of the very basic tenets on which our own country was founded and the fact that we are a country of immigrants is a very powerful point in generating a lot of interest and support in this program and generating more publicity and awareness about it. Because I think if people knew that there are now no longer these barriers, right, that traditional refugee resettlement agencies traditionally owned, now that anyone and everyone can be a part of this effort, I think that so many American student groups, activist groups, faith-based communities will be really excited and interested in getting involved.
We got about a minute left. Cecilia Munoz, this is the first phase of the Welcome Corps. What happens in the second phase?
Well, I hope in the second phase that it grows, right? I think the vision that we're all hoping for is that thousands of Americans step forward to sponsor refugees, that the experience for them will be as transformative as it is for the refugees, and that we will see that our capacity to do radical welcome, to become welcomers, can grow. This is part of our history. This is part of who we are in the United States. We hear a lot about anti-immigrant sentiment. We don't hear as much about the good people who are willing to step forward and say, I'm opening my home. I want to open my community. I want to help someone be like my ancestors and make a fresh start in the United States at a time of great need. So I hope that what we will see, and what we are in fact beginning to see, is an outpouring of support from the American people to become welcomers, and that instinct and our ability to provide room here will only grow.
And our thanks to Elisa Rokup, Elena Olea, and Cecilia Munoz.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back with more Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, right after this. Well, it's already February. How are you doing on your 2023 wellness resolutions? Well, if they included being more active, eating more fruits or vegetables, 2 local Latinas have started up businesses they say can help anyone find their own path to wellness. Producer Erica Gunderson kicks us off.
You're going to take 20 seconds to do whatever feels good in your body. You are the ambassador of your own body. So whatever that is that you need, take that right now.
When fitness instructor N.K. Gutierrez is teaching a Pilates or yoga class, the room and the wait list are usually packed.
My purpose is to create space for people to feel seen, heard, and leave me better than they came.
But no matter how popular her classes became throughout her 12-year career, Gutierrez says she was rarely featured in the marketing for the places she taught, an exclusion that made her start preemptively excluding herself.
I didn't feel like I was good enough. I didn't feel that I was small enough. I didn't feel that I fit in. And that's because the story that had always been told to me by being excluded was that I didn't fit in.
Realizing there were more women out there feeling unwelcome in the fitness world inspired her to keep showing up at the head of the class.
The reason why it's so important for me to show up unapologetically just as I am is because it gives people permission to do the same. Because they see me, they see my body, they see my hair, they hear my music that I unapologetically play, and they're just like, yes, thank you, I will be back.
It also inspired her to design her own line of athleisure wear named Thickletic.
Who else feels like they don't belong in this space because they don't see themselves in size or color? And that's how Thickletic was born. But the biggest needs that I see are still finding like clothing that work well for your body type, hold you in where you need to be held in, feel supported where you need to feel supported, and feel cute at the same time.
Fellow entrepreneur Anabel Martinez has also set her sights on the ingredients of wellness. She says she saw a need for quick, nutritious food options in West suburban Berwyn.
There is a lot of great businesses here, but there was nothing like just a juice bar, right? This started when I would visit my grandma in Mexico. We would always go to the mercado, to the markets, and there was always different stands, and one of them was always the juice bar. So that was cool to me, and we'd always get our juice. I'd get banana and orange juice, so it's two simple ingredients, and they were so good, a little bit of cinnamon on it.
Using that childhood inspiration, Martinez developed an approachable menu of juices, smoothies, and bowls that could be ordered online and picked up quickly.
We have a lot of nurses that come in, or people that work in the medical field, as well as teachers. We have a lot of great teachers that come in during lunchtime, and they want to be healthy and have something that's going to energize them throughout the day.
Ultimately, both entrepreneurs say their ambition is to welcome everyone to find their own way to wellness.
How to live a better and healthier lifestyle, and you could take it step by step. It doesn't have to be like an instant change in your life and routine. It's something that I want to share with the world.
How well you are is how well your community is. So I want as many people around me to be well so that Chicago can be well, and Illinois can be well, and the world can be well.
For Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
And you'll find more on both of those businesses on our website. Art is often called a universal language that transcends words, but in a museum setting, words are needed for patrons to have a complete experience, whether it's to understand the context for art on display, credit artists, or just to find the bathroom. The Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago wants to ensure that Spanish-speaking patrons can also have that complete experience. They're moving to become an entirely bilingual institution, starting with the exhibition Forecast Forum, which runs through April.
For the MCA, it really means creating a space that is offering the same experience for Spanish speakers as it does for English speakers. We're really looking at every single aspect and touch point where language plays a role in the relationship that the museum has with its visitors and ensuring that we're meeting the needs of Spanish, English, and bilingual speakers. So for us, that really is encompassing our frontline visitor services team, our exhibition content, which includes labels, didactics, video, image captions, to considering needs for live programming, including Spanish captions for English programming and original Spanish programming with English captions, to navigating our physical space through wayfinding and directional signage, to our digital footprint. And the last year has really been a sort of foundational year for the museum, really coming out of the pandemic and really establishing, who we want to be moving forward. The Forecast Forum exhibition, which opened just recently, was our first major exhibition that is presented in both languages. And in terms of exhibitions, we will have all exhibitions on view at the museum displayed in both languages by August of this year. The remainder of the projects that I had sort of outlined before, we plan to have fully in market by 2024.
Again, that exhibition is Forecast Forum Art in the Caribbean Diaspora, and it runs through April 23rd at MCA Chicago. And that's our show for this weekend. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And if you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Latino Voices and Black Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. And don't forget, you can catch my reporting on 91.5 FM WBEZ. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, I'm Michael Puente. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy, stay safe. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.